Alexandra, and my speech is on the Pope's visit to Cuba. For starters, how many of you consider yourself a religious person? And how many of you actively practice a religion? And what would you still continue to practice, or you don't have to raise your hand, but if your country had banned public worship, think about it, would you still continue to practice? And how would you feel if your country that was trying to dissuade you from practicing a religion, how would you feel if the leader of your religion came to visit? Well, in Cuba is a communist country. For a long time, the public practice of, in particular, Catholicism was not allowed. Judaism and there's one other religion. Those religions were not allowed to be practiced. And only 10% of the population, well, a number of people claim that they're Catholic, and only 10% of those people actually actively practice their faith. Many of them used to practice their faith in hiding, and only in the past years, people have been starting to, the culture is becoming more accepting of Catholicism in particular. And just this past March, Pope Benedict XVI, the leader of the Catholic Church, went to visit Cuba. It was a whole trip, and for his first stop was in Mexico. He went to Mexico, and during his sermon in Celaya, Mexico, he said, "Today it is evident that the Marxist ideology, in the way it was conceived, no longer corresponds to reality." He was talking about the whole communist regime in Cuba. He said it's not applicable to reality. It's not practical. And he said that on behalf of the Catholic Church is ready to help Cuba move on without any trauma. His second stop was to Cuba. There were four events that happened when he was there. He visited Santiago de Cuba, and he's had an open-air mass at the Revolution Plaza in Havana, and he also met with Fidel and Raul Castro. Santiago de Cuba. When the Pope visited there were crowds of people there, and Raul Castro gave a speech kind of justifying dictatorship, justifying the way that they were running things in Cuba. And they also, the Pope and his retinue also heard speeches from Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez and the Vice President in charge of economics, Mariano Alberto Murillo. And the Pope and his retinue, they were expecting a different message. They were expecting maybe something with hope or something with reform. They weren't expecting kind of like a reiteration of, as there was one news article quoted, of Stalin's regime or the communist regime. They were expecting something else, but all they heard was, well, this is what it is, and this is what we're going to keep doing. So when they were all praying, the Pope prayed for the needs of those who suffer, for those who are deprived of freedom, and for those who are separated from their loved ones. So he didn't come out outright and say, hey, that's wrong what you're talking about, but he instead prayed for something. He called for something greater. Then the next event, the Mass at the Revolution Plaza, there were thousands upon thousands of people there. Raul Castro, who was the current president, he was in the front row. And the theme of the Pope's sermon was religion openness and societal happiness, openness in Cuba. He called Cubans to search for an authentic freedom, a freedom within themselves, wanted them to come out of themselves, to bring about the openness, the unity that they wanted. You could have the government do stuff, but he was ultimately calling upon the people. He said each one is prepared to ask for truth, and if they decide to take the path of love, sowing reconciliation and brotherhood. There's so much, I guess, agitation, or there's so many fine lines that, if crossed, will cause anger. Then the Pope met with Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro, for those of you who don't know or don't remember, was the former communist leader of Cuba. Some people thought, I thought this too, I thought they were going to discuss politics, but instead they did not discuss politics. However, they discussed the church liturgy, and they discussed science's inability to fix future problems. And interestingly enough, Fidel told the Pope that he's very happy that Pope John Paul II and Mother Teresa, both Catholic figures, he's very happy they're both on their way to sainthood. He said that Mother Teresa in particular they both of them did a lot for Cuba, especially Mother Teresa, because she gave her life to the poorest of the poor. As Cuba, not all of it, you know, there are very poor parts of Cuba, and to see someone who's so willing to stand up for that was very inspiring. Then next, the Pope met with Raul Castro. Raul Castro succeeded his brother Fidel, and he is now the current president. And speaking to him, the Pope asked for a bigger role for the Church and asked for Good Friday to be made a national holiday. He said no one should feel excluded from taking up this exciting search for freedom by the limitations of their basic freedoms, or excused from this indolence or lack of material resources, a situation which is worsened when restrictive economic measures imposed from outside the country unfairly burden the people, which was, he was criticizing the U.S. embargo of Cuba. And to conclude, Pope Benedict in his trip was encouraging not only religious members, but the Cubans themselves to bring about the reform that they needed. And thank you so much for your attention. Here's my works cited page.
Thank you.